The morning sun cast long shadows across the archaeological dig site on Kepler 442b, where Dr. Sarachin carefully brushed dirt from what appeared to be another piece of ancient human technology. The colony world had been humanity's first major settlement beyond the solar system, established 3 centuries ago before the Great Silence had cut Earth off from all its distant children. Now, 50 years after contact had been re-established, teams like Sarah's were uncovering the forgotten history of humanity's early expansion. Professor Chen, you need to see this, called Marcus Webb, her graduate assistant, his voice tight with excitement. He stood 20 meters away, near what they had initially thought was just another foundation stone from the old settlement. Sarah set down her tools and walked over, her boots crunching on the dry soil. The dig site sprawled across several hectares of what had once been the colony's central district, but this particular section had yielded mostly mundane artifacts, cooking utensils, data storage devices, fragments of clothing. Nothing that would revolutionize their understanding of early human colonization. Marcus pointed to a section of ground where the soil had been carefully excavated, revealing what looked like a massive metal plate. I was following that power conduit we found yesterday, and it led to this. Look at the size of it. Sarah knelt beside the excavation, her trained eye taking in the details. The metal plate was easily 3 meters across, made from some kind of alloy that had resisted 3 centuries of weathering. Intricate designs covered its surface, but they weren't decorative. They looked functional, like circuit patterns or... These are targeting arrays, she whispered, recognition dawning. Marcus, get the ground-penetrating radar. I think we've found something significant. Within hours, the radar revealed the truth. The metal plate was just the tip of something much larger buried beneath the colony ruins. As they worked to expose more of the structure, Sarah began to understand what they had discovered. The smooth lines, the reinforced construction, the power systems that still showed faint energy signatures after 3 centuries of dormancy. It's a weapons platform, she told the expedition leader that evening. Dr. Yuki Tanaka had flown out from the main colony as soon as Sarah had sent her preliminary report. But, not like anything in our current military archives. The power requirements alone suggest something that would make our current planetary defense systems look like toys. Dr. Tanaka studied the holographic displays showing the buried structure. How large? Conservative estimates put it at 40 meters long, 15 wide. The main chamber appears to be some kind of firing mechanism, but the energy signatures don't match any known human weapon technology. It's like they were working with principles we haven't rediscovered yet. Or chose not to, Tanaka said quietly. The early colonists faced challenges we can barely imagine. Maybe they developed things out of necessity that later generations found too dangerous to pursue. Sarah nodded, but her attention was caught by something else in the scan data. Dr. Tanaka, look at these secondary chambers. They're not part of the weapon itself. They're storage? No, that's not right either. She manipulated the holographic display, rotating it to show cross-sections of the buried structure. These chambers are positioned around the main weapon like protective barriers. But they're not empty. There's something inside them, something with a very specific energy signature. Before Dr. Tanaka could respond, both women's communication devices chimed with an urgent alert. The notification that appeared on their displays made Sarah's blood run cold. Alien fleet detected at system's edge. Trajectory indicates approach to Kepler 442b. All civilian personnel report to designated shelters immediately. Dr. Tanaka was already activating her command protocols, her years as a former colonial defense officer taking over. Sarah, how quickly can we extract whatever's down there? Extract it? Dr. Tanaka, we're talking about a 40-meter weapons platform. Even if we had heavy excavation equipment, it would take weeks to safely remove it from the site. I'm not talking about removal, Tanaka said, her voice grim. I'm talking about activation. If the early colonists built this thing, they built it for a reason. And, given that we're about to have uninvited guests, I think we need to find out what that reason was. Sarah stared at her. You want to try to activate a 300-year-old weapon that we don't understand, using principles that aren't in any of our technical manuals? The alternative is facing whatever's coming with our current defenses, which consist of 3 patrol ships and a handful of ground-based plasma cannons. Sarah, your scan showed active power signatures. This thing isn't completely dead. Maybe it's been waiting. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. colonial security teams secured the dig site while Sarah and her team worked frantically to expose more of the ancient weapon. The ground-penetrating radar had been replaced by mining lasers, carefully cutting away centuries of accumulated soil and debris. As they worked, updates from the Colonial Defense Force painted an increasingly grim picture. The approaching fleet consisted of ships using technology that didn't match any known alien species in the database. They weren't responding to communication attempts, and their trajectory made it clear they were heading directly for the colony. Unknown vessels, this is Colonial Defense Command Kepler 442b, came the voice over the general communication channel. You are approaching a human colony world. Please identify yourselves and state your intentions. The response, when it came, was in accented but understandable English. Human settlement, we are the hegemony of the Crimson Star. Your species is known to us. You will surrender control of this world and all its resources, or face destruction. You have one planetary rotation to comply. Sarah paused in her work, listening to the alien transmission. Something about the tone bothered her, beyond the obvious threat. There was a dismissive quality to it, as if the aliens considered humanity barely worth the effort of making demands. Dr. Chen, Marcus called from the opposite side of the excavation. I think I've found an access panel. Sarah hurried over to where Marcus was working. He had exposed what looked like a control interface, its surface covered with symbols that were recognizably human but unlike any current writing system. The characters seemed to flow together, more like artistic calligraphy than practical text. It's old colonial standard, she realized. The early settlements developed their own writing systems before standardization. I can read some of it, but this is technical terminology I've never encountered. She traced the symbols with her finger, trying to make sense of the ancient text. Something about awakening? No, that's not right. Summoning? The translation matrix is giving me conflicting interpretations. Dr. Tanaka appeared at her shoulder. Sarah, we're running out of time. The alien fleet will be in orbital position within 18 hours. Can you activate it or not? Sarah looked down at the control panel, then at the massive weapon platform they had partially excavated. The morning's archaeological discovery had turned into humanity's potential salvation, and the weight of that responsibility was crushing. I think so, she said finally. But I need to understand what we're actually activating. The power readings suggest this isn't just a conventional weapon. The energy signature is unlike anything in our current technology base. She began working with the control interface, her knowledge of old colonial standard allowing her to navigate the basic menu systems. As she worked, more panels became active, displaying information that made her increasingly concerned. Dr. Tanaka, this weapon, it's not just a defensive system. According to these readings, it's designed to interface with something else. Something that's stored in those secondary chambers I identified earlier. Interface with what? Sarah continued reading the ancient text, her translation becoming more confident as she found patterns in the language. I think it's biological. The early colonists weren't just building a weapon. They were building something that could summon and control something alive. The implications of her discovery were interrupted by another transmission from the approaching alien fleet. This time, the tone was even more dismissive. Human colony, we have analyzed your defensive capabilities. Your technology is primitive, your numbers insignificant. We will take this world with minimal effort. Surrender now, and some of your population may be allowed to serve as laborers. Dr. Tanaka's jaw tightened. Sarah, whatever the colonists built, we need it operational. How long? Sarah looked at the control systems, trying to estimate the complexity of the activation sequence. Give me 6 hours. Maybe less if I can figure out the startup protocols. As her team worked to expose more of the ancient weapon, Sarah began to piece together what the original colonists had created. The technical documentation, written in the flowing script of old colonial standard, told a story of desperation and innovation that humbled her. The early colony had faced threats that weren't recorded in any historical archive. According to the weapons documentation, hostile alien forces had attacked the settlement multiple times during its first decade. Conventional human weapons had proven inadequate against enemy technology, forcing the colonists to explore alternatives that pushed the boundaries of acceptable science. Dr. Chen, Marcus called, I've exposed another control panel. This one seems to be connected to those secondary chambers you identified. Sarah moved to the new interface, her growing understanding of the ancient writing system allowing her to read the labels more quickly. What she saw made her pause. Neural interface protocols, she read aloud. Symbiotic activation sequences. Consciousness integration matrix. She looked up at Dr. Tanaka with concern. Whatever's in those chambers, it's designed to bond with the human operator. Bond how? According to this, the weapon requires a human consciousness to direct its functions. It's not just automated defense system. It's more like a partnership between human intelligence and whatever they bred or created to power it. Dr. Tanaka studied the excavated weapon platform, noting how its organic curves seemed to flow into the more mechanical components. Sarah, I need you to be completely honest with me. Can this system defend our colony? Sarah looked at the ancient documentation, reading specifications that described power outputs beyond anything in current human arsenals. If these numbers are accurate, this single platform could destroy an entire invasion fleet. But the cost. What cost? The human operator doesn't just control the weapon. According to these protocols, they become part of it. The neural bonding process is described as permanent. Whoever activates this system won't be coming back. The weight of that revelation settled over the excavation site like a physical presence. The ancient colonists hadn't just built a weapon. They had built something that required the ultimate sacrifice from its user. As the hours passed and more of the weapon platform was exposed, Sarah began to understand the full scope of what the early settlers had created. The central firing chamber was just one component of a complex system that seemed to blend technology with something that defied current scientific understanding. The secondary chambers, when finally exposed, contained what looked like massive eggs or cocoons, each one connected to the main weapon by organic-looking conduits. The biosignatures from these chambers indicated that whatever was inside was still alive, somehow sustained by the weapon's power systems across 3 centuries of dormancy. It's incredible, Sarah whispered as she studied the readings. They created some kind of symbiotic organism, something designed to interface with human consciousness and channel that intelligence through a weapon system beyond our current capabilities. And it's been waiting here for 300 years, Dr. Tanaka observed. Waiting for someone to wake it up. As if in response to her words, the alien fleet's final transmission echoed across the colony. Human settlement, your time has expired. We are beginning our descent. Resistance is futile. Your primitive weapons cannot harm our vessels. Sarah looked at the ancient control systems, now fully activated and displaying readouts that showed the weapon's incredible potential. Somewhere above them, an alien force was preparing to take their world, confident in their technological superiority and dismissive of human capabilities. They had no idea what the early colonists had left sleeping beneath the ruins of their settlement. But Sarah was about to wake it up and show them exactly what humanity was capable of when pushed to the edge of extinction. The ancient weapon hummed with growing power, its organic components stirring to life after centuries of slumber. Soon, the aliens would learn that mocking humanity's defenses had been a fatal mistake. The alien fleet descended from orbit with the arrogant precision of predators approaching helpless prey. Admiral Zektar of the Crimson Star Hegemony stood on the command bridge of the flagship Voidrender, watching the human colony grow larger on the tactical display. 300 ships of varying sizes accompanied his flagship, more than enough firepower to reduce the primitive human settlement to radioactive dust. Status report, Zektar commanded, his 4 arms working the holographic controls with practiced efficiency. The hegemony had conquered 17 worlds in the past solar cycle, and humans had been among the most disappointing opponents they had encountered. Colony population approximately 2 million, reported his tactical officer. Defensive systems minimal. 3 patrol craft in orbit, surface installations limited to basic plasma artillery. No evidence of orbital defense platforms or shield generators. Zektar's mandibles clicked in amusement. Humans are known for their primitive technology. They spread across space before developing proper defensive capabilities. Their colonies are essentially gift-wrapped for anyone with actual military strength. Through the viewport, he could see the planet's surface clearly now. The main colony sprawled across a fertile river valley, completely exposed to orbital bombardment. No attempt at defensive positioning, no hardened installations, no sign that these humans understood the first thing about warfare against a technologically superior force. Sir, the communications officer interrupted, we're receiving a transmission from the surface. Put it through. Let's hear their surrender terms. The holographic display activated, showing a middle-aged human woman in some kind of uniform. Her expression was calm, almost resigned, but there was something in her eyes that Zektar found mildly interesting. This is Dr. Yuki Tanaka, Colonial Defense Commander for Kepler 442b, the human said. We have received your demands and formally reject them. This world belongs to humanity, and we will defend it. Zektar's amusement deepened. Human, you understand that your defensive capabilities are insignificant compared to our fleet? Your 3 patrol ships carry weapons that could barely damage our escort vessels, much less our capital ships. Perhaps, Tanaka replied. But, you've made one critical error in your assessment. And, what would that be? You assume you're fighting modern humanity. You're not. You're about to face something much older, and much more dangerous. The transmission ended, leaving Zektar staring at the blank holographic display. After a moment, he turned to his tactical officer. Begin orbital bombardment. Target their communication centers first, then, government buildings. Keep civilian casualties to acceptable levels. Dead workers are useless workers. Yes, Admiral. The first wave of hegemony plasma bolts streaked down from orbit, designed to cripple the colony's command structure while leaving the infrastructure relatively intact. Zektar watched the impacts with professional satisfaction, noting how the humans' primitive shields failed within moments of coming under fire. Sir, the sensor operator called, I'm detecting unusual energy readings from the colony. Grid reference 77 Alpha. Zektar frowned and moved to the sensor station. The readings were indeed unusual, showing power outputs that didn't match any known human technology. Analysis? Unknown, sir. The energy signature is unlike anything in our databases. It appears to be building in intensity, but the source is underground. Underground weapons platform? Possibly, sir, but the readings don't match conventional weapon systems. There's something organic about the energy signature. Zektar dismissed the concern with a gesture. Humans are known for their biological experiments. Probably some kind of primitive defense organism. Increase bombardment intensity on that grid reference. Meanwhile, 40 meters below the surface, Saracen was making the final connections to the ancient weapon system. The neural interface headset felt heavier than it should, its organic components warm against her skin. Around her, the weapon platform hummed with increasing energy, the biochambers glowing with an ethereal light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. Sarah, you don't have to do this, Dr. Tanaka said through the communication link. We can evacuate the colony, try to hide until help arrives. Help from where? Sarah replied, checking the final system diagnostics. Earth is 6 months away even with our fastest ships. The other colonies don't have fleets capable of fighting that force up there. This is our only chance. The neural interface protocols were clearer now that she had spent hours studying them. The early colonists had been thorough in their documentation, perhaps knowing that future generations would need to understand what they had created. The weapon wasn't just a tool. It was a partnership between human consciousness and something that the colonists had bred specifically for war. Beginning neural synchronization, Sarah announced, activating the final sequence. The headset came alive against her skin, tiny filaments extending to make contact with her nervous system. The sensation was unlike anything she had ever experienced, as if her consciousness was expanding beyond the boundaries of her physical body. Through the weapon sensors, she could suddenly perceive the alien fleet in orbit with perfect clarity. 300 ships arranged in a standard conquest formation, their weapons actively bombarding the colony. She could sense their arrogance, their absolute certainty that humanity posed no threat. They were about to learn otherwise. In the biochambers around her, ancient organisms stirred to life. The colonists had called them guardians, and Sarah could understand why. They were creatures of pure purpose, bred from the genetic material of predators from a dozen different worlds and, then, modified with technology that pushed the boundaries of biological engineering. Neural link established, Sarah reported, though her voice sounded strange to her own ears. Awakening the Guardians. Above ground, the first sign that something was changing came from the seismic sensors. Tremors radiated out from the dig site as massive forms began to move beneath the earth. The excavation equipment scattered as the ground itself began to shift and reshape. Admiral Zektar watched the sensor readings with growing confusion as the energy signatures from the planet's surface spiked beyond all reasonable parameters. What is happening down there? Unknown, sir. The underground structure is moving. It appears to be rising to the surface. Through the main viewport, they could see the colony below changing. The ground was bulging upward in several locations, and strange lights were beginning to shine through the soil. The human settlements were being evacuated, people fleeing in orderly groups that suggested they had planned for this possibility. Sir, the tactical officer called urgently, massive power spike from the surface. Energy output is approaching capital ship levels. Zektar's confidence wavered for the first time. From underground? That's impossible. Humans don't have that kind of technology. The first Guardian broke the surface like a mountain coming to life. 40 meters of biomechanical terror rose from the earth, its form a perfect fusion of organic predator and technological weapon. Its hide was armored with plates that seemed to shift and flow like living metal, while its multiple weapon systems tracked the orbital fleet with intelligent precision. By the Crimson Star, Zektar breathed, staring at the creature through the tactical display. What is that thing? A second Guardian emerged half a kilometer away, then a third, then a fourth. Each one was unique in its configuration, as if bred for specific combat roles. Some were clearly designed for anti-air warfare, their biocannons tracking the ships in orbit. Others appeared to be built for ground combat, their massive forms bristling with close-range weapon systems. Admiral, the communications officer said, incoming transmission from the surface. Sarah's voice filled the bridge, but it was different now. Enhanced, somehow, carrying harmonics that suggested multiple consciousness speaking in unison. Hegemony Fleet, you came here expecting to face modern humanity. But, you've awakened something much older. Something that remembers what it means to fight for survival. Through the neural link, Sarah could feel the Guardian's consciousness merging with her own. They were ancient, patient, and absolutely lethal. The early colonists had created them during humanity's darkest hour, when extinction seemed inevitable. They were the ultimate expression of human determination, life itself weaponized and turned against those who threatened humanity's future. You want to know about human technology? Sarah continued, her voice carrying the combined will of 6 awakened Guardians. Let us show you what we build when we're truly desperate. The first Guardian opened fire, its biocannon launching projectiles that defied conventional physics. The round seemed to phase through space itself, bypassing the hegemony ship's shields and striking their hulls directly. The escort vessel targeted simply ceased to exist, its molecular structure unraveling under the Guardian's exotic weapon fire. Zektar's confidence shattered as he watched one of his ships disappear in a cloud of dissociated atoms. All ships, evasive maneuvers. Return fire. The hegemony fleet opened fire with everything they had, plasma bolts and missile swarms filling the space between orbit and surface. The Guardians responded by demonstrating why the early colonists had designed them as they had. Their bioarmor adapted in real time to incoming weapons, developing immunity to energy types within moments of first contact. The second Guardian revealed a different capability entirely. Its form began to shift and change, sections of its body launching into space as independent organisms. These smaller bioships moved with impossible agility, swarming around the hegemony vessels and attaching themselves to hull sections with predatory efficiency. Sir, they're eating through our armor, the tactical officer reported in horror. These organisms, they're literally consuming our ships. Admiral Zektar watched his formation begin to disintegrate as the human bioweapons demonstrated capabilities that shouldn't exist. Ships that had conquered worlds were being systematically destroyed by creatures that seemed to violate every known law of warfare. How is this possible? He demanded. These are biological organisms. They can't survive in vacuum. They can't generate these kinds of energy outputs. Through the neural link, Sarah could sense his confusion and fear. The arrogance was gone now, replaced by the dawning realization that the hegemony had made a terrible mistake. They had expected to face a primitive human colony. Instead, they had awakened humanity's ancient guardians. The third Guardian demonstrated yet another capability, its form beginning to glow with internal energy. When it released that energy, it wasn't in the form of conventional weapons fire. Instead, reality itself seemed to bend around the Guardian, creating gravitational anomalies that pulled hegemony ships out of their orbital positions. Impossible, Zektar breathed, watching his flagship's instruments register gravitational forces that shouldn't exist. Biological organisms cannot manipulate gravity. You're thinking like a normal species, Sarah's enhanced voice replied over the communication channel. Humans don't accept impossibility. When we're threatened with extinction, we find ways to break the laws that everyone else accepts as absolute. The fourth Guardian had finished its emergence and revealed the most disturbing capability yet. It began to replicate itself, its biomechanical form splitting into multiple smaller versions that retained all the original's capabilities. Within minutes, what had been 4 Guardians became dozens, then hundreds. The hegemony fleet found itself facing an enemy that multiplied under fire and adapted to every weapon they possessed. Their technological superiority, which had conquered 17 worlds, was completely useless against opponents that seemed to exist outside the normal rules of warfare. Admiral, the navigation officer called desperately, requesting permission to withdraw. We're losing ships faster than we can target these things. Zektar stared at the tactical display, watching his 300-ship fleet being systematically destroyed by creatures that his species science insisted could not exist. The humans hadn't just defended their world. They had revealed themselves to be something far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Granted, he said finally. Signal general retreat. All ships jumped to hyperspace immediately. But, as the surviving hegemony vessels began to flee, Sarah's voice followed them into the darkness between the stars, carried by Guardian bioships that had attached themselves to the fleeing vessels like parasites. Remember this day, the enhanced voice said. Remember what happens to those who threaten humanity. We are not the primitive species you thought we were. We are the children of colonists who faced extinction and chose to become something more dangerous than the predators hunting them. As the last hegemony ship disappeared into hyperspace, the Guardians began to settle back into dormancy. Their purpose fulfilled, they would return to their underground chambers to wait for the next threat to humanity's survival. Sarah felt the neural connection beginning to fade as the immediate danger passed, but something had changed. She was no longer just Dr. Sarah Chan, archaeologist and academic. She was now the Guardian of Kepler 442b, forever linked to the ancient weapons that had saved her world. The aliens had mocked humanity's ancient weapon, dismissing it as primitive technology from a backward species. They had learned too late that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't any particular piece of technology. It was humanity's absolute refusal to accept defeat, no matter the cost. Word of the Kepler 442b incident spread through the galaxy like wildfire, carried by the traumatized survivors of Admiral Zektar's fleet. In the seedy cantinas of border worlds, the trading posts of neutral space, and the military briefing rooms of a dozen species, the same story was told with increasing embellishment. Humanity had weapons that defied known science, biological horrors that could adapt to any attack and multiply under fire. Most species dismissed these accounts as the fevered imaginings of defeated soldiers. The hegemony of the Crimson Star was known for its arrogance, and their humbling by a human colony was exactly the kind of comeuppance that many species secretly enjoyed hearing about. But a few listeners took note, filed away the details, and began making plans. 3 months after the battle, those plans came to fruition in the form of the Consortium of Allied Sciences, a coalition of species that prided itself on rational, methodical approaches to problem solving. Unlike the brutish hegemony, the consortium believed in studying their enemies before attacking, understanding their capabilities through careful observation and analysis. Dr. Veltarzan, the consortium's leading xenobiologist, stood before the assembled War Council on the neutral station of Kepler 7, presenting his findings to representatives of 6 different species. His research into the Kepler 442b incident had been thorough, methodical, and deeply disturbing. The evidence is clear, Dr. Zan stated, his 3 eyes focusing on different members of the council simultaneously. Humanity has developed biological weapons that operate outside established scientific parameters. These Guardians, as the humans apparently call them, demonstrate capabilities that our current understanding of biology says should be impossible. Council leader Mordak, a crystalline being from the Silicon Reaches, resonated with skeptical harmonics. You're suggesting that a species barely 3 centuries into space travel has solved problems that have challenged galactic civilization for millennia? I'm suggesting that they've approached those problems from a completely different direction, Dr. Zan replied. While we've focused on technological solutions, humans have pursued biological ones. And they've achieved results that, frankly, terrify me. He activated the holographic display, showing reconstructed images of the Guardians based on hegemony sensor data. The biomechanical creatures that appeared were nightmarish fusions of organic and technological elements, their forms shifting and adapting even in the static recordings. These organisms demonstrate real-time adaptation to energy weapons, the ability to survive in vacuum without apparent life support, manipulation of gravitational fields through biological processes, and self-replication that maintains full functionality in the copies. Any one of these capabilities would be remarkable. All of them together suggest that humanity has mastered biological engineering to a degree that makes them extremely dangerous. Ambassador Crixal of the Hegemony, one of the few survivors of the original fleet, spoke up from his position at the council table. His usual arrogance had been replaced by something approaching humility. Honored council members, I urge you to take this threat seriously. I witnessed these creatures destroy ships that had conquered worlds. Our weapons were useless, our shields meaningless. If humanity has more of these things waiting on other worlds. Which brings us to the central question, interrupted Council Leader Mordek. How many human colonies possess these weapons? Are we dealing with an isolated incident, or has humanity secretly militarized their entire colonial network? Dr. Zan manipulated the holographic display, showing a map of known human space. Red indicators marked the locations of confirmed human colonies, while amber markers showed worlds where human presence was suspected but unconfirmed. Intelligence suggests that humanity's early colonial expansion was more extensive than previously believed. The Great Silence, when Earth lost contact with its colonies for nearly 2 centuries, appears to have been a period of intensive development. When communication was re-established, many colony worlds reported archaeological discoveries that provided significant technological advances. The implications of that statement settled over the council like a cold wind. If humanity's colonies had been secretly developing advanced bioweapons for 2 centuries, the balance of power in the galaxy was far different than anyone had realized. We need verification, Council Leader Mordek declared. Dr. Zan, I'm authorizing a research expedition to investigate human colonies and determine the extent of their biological weapons program. Use whatever resources necessary, but find out what we're really dealing with. Meanwhile, on Kepler 442b, Dr. Sarah Chen was dealing with the aftermath of her neural bonding with the Guardian system. The connection had changed her in ways that she was only beginning to understand. Her perception of reality had expanded beyond normal human parameters, allowing her to sense things that shouldn't be detectable by conventional means. Dr. Chen, Marcus Webb called from across the reconstructed laboratory. We're receiving some unusual signals from the deep space monitoring stations. Multiple ships approaching from different vectors, but they're not broadcasting standard identification codes. Sarah looked up from the Guardian biosample she had been studying, her enhanced senses immediately detecting the pattern that Marcus had missed. They're not attacking, she said with certainty that surprised even her. This is reconnaissance. Someone wants to study what happened here. Through the neural link that still connected her to the dormant Guardian system, Sarah could feel the ancient weapons stirring restlessly beneath the colony. They sensed the approaching ships as well, and their response was distinctly different from their reaction to the hegemony fleet. These weren't predators coming to conquer. These were researchers coming to analyze. Contact Dr. Tanaka, Sarah instructed. Tell her we need to implement the Lazarus Protocol. Marcus looked confused. I'm not familiar with that designation. You wouldn't be. It's something the original colonists left for us, buried in the Guardian archives. Instructions for what to do when other species start trying to understand our capabilities. The Lazarus Protocol, Sarah had discovered, was far more comprehensive than simple defensive measures. The early colonists had anticipated that humanity's biological weapons would eventually attract scientific interest from other species, and they had prepared accordingly. Hidden throughout human space were installations designed to demonstrate just how far humanity's bioweapons program had progressed. Over the next several days, as the consortium research ships established orbital positions around various human colonies, they began to discover that the Kepler 442b incident had been just the beginning. Each world they investigated revealed evidence of biological weapons programs that had been developing for centuries. On New Geneva, consortium researchers found massive biofactories capable of producing Guardian-class organisms in industrial quantities. The facilities were clearly operational, maintained by automated systems that had continued their work for generations without human oversight. On Proxima Station, they discovered weapons testing ranges where massive craters suggested that humanity had been experimenting with biological weapons capable of planetary-scale destruction. Sensor readings from the test site showed residual energy signatures that defied conventional analysis. On Tau Ceti Prime, the most disturbing discovery of all, evidence that humanity had been experimenting with consciousness transfer technology, allowing human minds to directly control biological weapons on a massive scale. The implications were staggering. If humans could merge their consciousness with their biological weapons, they could create coordinated defense networks spanning entire star systems. Dr. Zan compiled his findings with growing alarm as each new discovery revealed the scope of humanity's secret weapons program. What had initially seemed like an isolated incident on a single colony world was revealed to be part of a network spanning dozens of systems. Council members, he reported during an emergency session, we are not dealing with a primitive species that happened upon some advanced technology. We are dealing with a civilization that has spent 2 centuries systematically developing biological weapons beyond our current ability to comprehend or counter. How extensive is their network? Demanded Council Leader Mordek. Conservative estimates suggest that every major human colony possesses some form of biological weapons capability. But that's not the most disturbing finding. Dr. Zan manipulated the holographic display to show communication patterns between human worlds. They're all connected. The bioweapons on different worlds appear to be designed to work together as a coordinated defense network. Ambassador Crixal leaned forward in his seat. You're saying that attacking any human world would trigger a response from all of them? I'm saying that humanity has created a biological defense network that spans their entire colonial territory. Attack one world, and you face the combined bioweapons of dozens of systems. But there's something else. Dr. Zan's 3 eyes focused intently on the council members. The consciousness transfer technology appears to be the key. Human operators can control biological weapons across multiple star systems simultaneously. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. They had been operating under the assumption that humanity was a young species with limited military capabilities. Instead, they had discovered a civilization that had secretly developed weapons systems beyond anything in known space. There's more, Dr. Zan continued reluctantly. Our deep space sensors have detected massive biological structures in the void between human systems. They appear to be dormant, but the energy signatures suggest they're Guardian-class organisms adapted for space travel. Humanity may have the capability to deploy biological weapons anywhere in the galaxy. Council Leader Mordek resonated with what could only be described as fear. How many of these space-based weapons do they have? Unknown. Our sensors can only detect the largest ones, and those number in the thousands. But if humanity has been developing this technology for 2 centuries, Dr. Zan let the implications speak for themselves. On Kepler 442b, Sarachin felt the moment when the consortium researchers finally understood what they were facing. Through the Guardian network, she could sense their growing alarm as each new discovery revealed another layer of humanity's preparations. The early colonists had indeed planned well. Dr. Chen, Marcus called, incoming transmission from Earth Command. Priority Alpha encryption. Sarah activated the communication link, unsurprised to see Admiral Rebecca Harrison, commander of Earth's Home Defense Fleet. The Admiral's expression was grim but determined. Dr. Chen, we're receiving reports from monitoring stations throughout human space. Multiple alien research fleets are investigating our colonies. I assume this is connected to your recent activation of the Guardian system? Yes, Admiral. The Lazarus Protocol is in effect. They're learning exactly what they wanted to know about our capabilities. And what exactly are they learning? Sarah smiled, though there was no humor in the expression. They're learning that when the early colonists lost contact with Earth, they didn't just sit quietly and wait for rescue. They prepared for war. And they've been preparing for 300 years. Through the Guardian network, Sarah could feel the stirring of biological weapons on dozens of worlds as alien researchers triggered automated responses designed to demonstrate humanity's capabilities. The message was clear: humanity was not the primitive species that the galaxy had assumed. Admiral, Sarah continued, I recommend implementing full defensive protocols. The consortium research fleets are gathering information, but that information is going to terrify them. They're going to realize that attacking humanity would mean facing an enemy that's been preparing for this war longer than their civilizations have existed. Understood. Dr. Chen, one more question. In your assessment, are we ready for what's coming? Sarah felt the guardian consciousness stirring in the depths of her mind, ancient and patient and absolutely lethal. Around human space, thousands of biological weapons waited in the void, ready to demonstrate why attacking humanity had been the galaxy's greatest mistake. Admiral, we've been ready for 300 years. The only question is whether they'll be smart enough to back down before they find out just how ready we are. As the consortium research fleets completed their investigations and began transmitting their findings to the galactic community, a new understanding began to emerge. Humanity wasn't just another species struggling to survive in a hostile galaxy. They were apex predators who had been hiding their true nature behind a facade of primitive technology and peaceful intentions. And, now that their secret was revealed, the galaxy would have to decide whether to treat them as equals or risk discovering what humanity had built to defend itself against extinction. The Galactic Council chambers on Nexus Prime had never seen such a gathering. Representatives from 43 different species filled the vast amphitheater, their varied forms creating a rainbow of alien physiology and technology. But, despite their diversity, they all shared one common emotion: fear. The holographic display at the center of the chamber showed the damning evidence compiled by the consortium research fleets. Images of Guardian bioweapons, readings from planetary defense networks, sensor data from the massive biological constructs hidden in deep space between human systems. The scope of humanity's secret weapons program had shocked even the most paranoid military analysts. Secretary General Moldovan, an ancient being from the First Reach whose species had helped establish the Galactic Council centuries ago, activated the chamber's central addressing system. His voice carried harmonics of deep concern as he spoke. Fellow council members, we face an unprecedented situation. A species we categorized as technologically primitive has revealed defensive capabilities that exceed our current understanding of biological science. The question before us is simple: how do we respond? Ambassador Krixal of the hegemony, still bearing the psychological scars of the Kepler 442b incident, rose from his designated position. Honored Secretary General, with respect, the question is not how we respond. The question is whether we can respond. My fleet had numerical and technological superiority, and we were destroyed by creatures that shouldn't exist according to known science. Perhaps, interrupted Dr. Veltarzan, we should consider that our understanding of science is incomplete. The humans appear to have discovered biological principles that we haven't encountered before. Rather than viewing this as a threat, perhaps we should see it as an opportunity for scientific advancement through cooperation. A ripple of disagreement passed through the council chambers as various species voiced their opinions through their preferred communication methods. Some spoke aloud, others communicated through bioluminescent patterns, and a few used direct electromagnetic transmission to express their dissent. Ambassador Torek of the Silicon Reaches resonated with sharp disapproval. Cooperation implies equality. How can we negotiate as equals with a species that has concealed weapons capable of destroying entire fleets? Their deception suggests hostile intent. Or, responded Ambassador Yelena of the Verdant Systems, their concealment suggests they developed these capabilities out of necessity. Our intelligence reports indicate that early human colonies faced significant threats during their expansion period. Perhaps they were simply preparing for exactly the kind of aggressive expansion that the hegemony attempted. The debate continued for hours, with various species arguing for responses ranging from immediate military action to formal diplomatic recognition of humanity as a major galactic power. But, underlying all their discussions was the uncomfortable knowledge that humanity had fundamentally changed the balance of power in known space. Meanwhile, in a secure facility deep beneath the surface of Earth, Admiral Rebecca Harrison stood before the most classified military installation in human space. The Darwin Institute had been operational for 3 centuries, hidden from public knowledge and dedicated to a single purpose: ensuring that humanity would never again face extinction. Dr. Morrison, Admiral Harrison addressed the elderly woman standing beside her. The Galactic Council is in emergency session. Our intelligence indicates they're debating their response to the recent revelations about our defense capabilities. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, director of the Darwin Institute and descendant of the original project founders, nodded thoughtfully. At 97 years old, she had devoted her entire life to continuing the work that the early colonists had begun during humanity's darkest hours. Admiral, I've been expecting this day for decades. The Lazarus Protocol was always designed to reveal our capabilities when the galactic community became too curious about our defenses. The question is whether they'll choose wisdom or aggression in their response. Admiral Harrison studied the massive biochambers visible through the facility's reinforced viewing windows. Each one contained a Guardian-class organism, but these were different from the ones deployed on the colony worlds. These were the next generation, developed through centuries of refinement and enhancement. Dr. Morrison, if the Council chooses aggression, are we prepared? Admiral, humanity has been preparing for this possibility since the day the first alien ship appeared at the edge of our solar system. What we revealed to the consortium researchers was just the beginning. The real question is whether the galactic community is prepared for what we'll show them if they force our hand. Dr. Morrison led Admiral Harrison deeper into the facility, past laboratories where human consciousness interfaced with biological systems beyond normal comprehension. The neural-link technology that Dr. Chen had used on Kepler 442b was primitive compared to what the Darwin Institute had developed. The colony worlds deployed Guardian systems designed for defensive operations, Dr. Morrison explained as they walked. But the Institute has been developing something much more comprehensive. We call it the Prometheus Network. She gestured toward a massive chamber where hundreds of biopods lined the walls, each one containing a human volunteer linked to the network through advanced neural interfaces. Each operator can control thousands of Guardian units simultaneously across multiple star systems. If activated, the Prometheus network would give humanity effective control over biological weapons throughout known space. Admiral Harrison absorbed the implications of what she was seeing. Dr. Morrison, you're talking about the ability to deploy biological weapons anywhere in the galaxy. I'm talking about ensuring that humanity survives whatever the galactic community decides to throw at us. The early colonists faced extinction and chose to become something more dangerous than their enemies. We've continued that work for 3 centuries. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from Earth's orbital monitoring station. Admiral Harrison activated her command interface, connecting to Admiral Park, commander of the monitoring network. Admiral Harrison, we're detecting massive fleet movements throughout known space. Multiple species are mobilizing their military forces. Estimated combined fleet strength exceeds 50,000 ships. Admiral Harrison exchanged glances with Dr. Morrison. Admiral Park, what are their movement patterns? They appear to be converging on staging areas at the edge of human space. If this is a coordinated military action, we could be facing invasion forces from a dozen different species within the next 72 hours. Dr. Morrison's expression remained calm, but Admiral Harrison could see the steel in her eyes. Admiral, it appears the galactic community has chosen aggression over wisdom. I recommend immediate activation of the Prometheus network. Are you certain, Dr. Morrison? Once we activate the full network, there's no concealing what humanity has become. Admiral, concealment was never the goal. Survival was. And if 43 species want to test humanity's commitment to survival, they're about to learn exactly what we're willing to become to ensure our continued existence. On Nexus Prime, the Galactic Council had reached its decision. Secretary General Moldovan stood before the assembled representatives, his ancient features betraying none of the conflict that had preceded this moment. Fellow council members, after extensive deliberation, we have concluded that humanity's concealment of advanced weapons systems represents a clear threat to galactic stability. Their biological weapons violate multiple interspecies treaties regarding the development of adaptive military organisms. Ambassador Crixell nodded approvingly. The hegemony supports immediate action to neutralize this threat before humanity can further develop these weapons. The motion has been approved, Secretary General Moldovan continued. Combined fleet operations will commence immediately to secure human systems and place their biological weapons under Council oversight. This action is taken not out of aggression, but out of necessity to maintain galactic peace. What the Council didn't know was that every word of their deliberations had been monitored by humanity's intelligence network. Deep space listening posts, hidden throughout the galaxy for centuries, had provided Earth with complete information about the galactic community's decision. Dr. Morrison stood in the Darwin Institute's central command chamber, watching as the Prometheus network came online for the first time in its 3-century development history. Across human space, Guardian systems that had been dormant for generations stirred to life. In the void between stars, massive biological constructs began moving toward predetermined positions. Network activation complete, reported Commander Chenwei, Dr. Sarah Chen's younger brother who had followed his sister into the Guardian program. All nodes are responding. We have operational control over biological assets in 47 star systems. Excellent. Commander Chen, transmit the prepared message to all approaching fleets. It's time they understood exactly what they're trying to conquer. The message that went out to the combined galactic fleet was simple, direct, and terrifying in its implications. It was transmitted simultaneously in 43 different languages, ensuring that every species represented in the Armada would understand the warning they were receiving. Attention all vessels approaching human space. You have been deceived about our nature and capabilities. Humanity is not the primitive species you believe us to be. We are the descendants of colonists who faced extinction and chose to become something more dangerous than the predators hunting them. As the message played, long-range sensors began detecting the true scope of humanity's preparations. Guardian bioweapons emerged from concealment throughout the galaxy, revealing themselves in numbers that defied the intelligence estimates that had prompted this military action. For 3 centuries, we have prepared for this day. We have developed biological weapons that exist outside your understanding of science. We have created consciousness networks that span star systems. We have bred organisms that can survive in any environment and adapt to any weapon. Admiral Zektar, who had somehow been convinced to join the combined fleet despite his previous experience with human weapons, watched his sensors display readings that brought back nightmarish memories of the Kepler 442b battle. The weapons you encountered on our colony worlds were defensive systems designed to protect civilian populations. What you face now are our military assets, developed specifically to ensure that attacking humanity results in complete extinction for our enemies. The scope of what humanity had concealed became clear as massive biological structures emerged from the void, revealing themselves to be not just weapons but entire ecosystems designed for war. Ships that had seemed to be asteroids revealed themselves as guardian organisms large enough to swallow capital ships. Space itself seemed alive with hostile biological entities that had been waiting patiently for this moment. We offer you one opportunity to withdraw. Leave human space immediately and we will consider this encounter a misunderstanding. Continue your approach, and you will face 3 centuries of human preparation for total war. Secretary General Moldovan received the transmission aboard his command vessel, the massive Council ship Unity. Around his fleet, the readings showed biological weapons in numbers that made their previous intelligence estimates look pathetic. By the ancient laws, he whispered, staring at sensor readings that showed guardian organisms larger than his capital ships. They weren't hiding primitive weapons. They were concealing an entire biological civilization. The combined fleet, 50,000 strong and representing the military might of dozens of species, found itself facing an enemy that they had fundamentally misunderstood. Humanity hadn't been hiding their technology. They had been hiding their evolution into something beyond conventional biological limitations. Admiral Harrison's voice continued the transmission from Earth, her words carrying the weight of 3 centuries of preparation. Humanity chose long ago to become whatever was necessary to survive. We have become the synthesis of consciousness and biological warfare, the merger of intelligence and adaptive evolution. You came here expecting to fight a primitive species with advanced weapons. Instead, you face a civilization that has transcended the normal limitations of biological life. We are no longer just human. We are humanity weaponized, consciousness given form as living instruments of war. As the combined fleet contemplated the scope of what they faced, guardian organisms throughout the galaxy began demonstrating capabilities that violated every known law of physics and biology. They moved faster than light without technological assistance, manipulated matter at the molecular level through biological processes, and demonstrated intelligence networks that spanned multiple star systems. This is your final warning, Admiral Harrison concluded. Withdraw now, and humanity will return to peaceful coexistence with the galactic community. Continue your approach, and you will learn why we spent 3 centuries preparing for this war. The combined fleet found itself facing a choice that would determine the future of galactic civilization. They could retreat and acknowledge humanity as an equal power, or they could continue their attack and face an enemy that had evolved beyond their ability to comprehend or defeat. In the end, survival instinct proved stronger than pride. The combined fleet, 50,000 strong, turned away from human space without firing a single shot. They had learned that humanity's ancient weapons weren't just tools of war. They were humanity's transformation into something that made war itself obsolete through the simple threat of absolute victory. The galaxy would never again make the mistake of underestimating the species that had faced extinction and chosen to become something more dangerous than any predator that hunted them.